Okay.
We're live, guys.
We are.
Here we are. Hello, world. I know we invited a lot of our friends to this, so I think I invited some people to this that I'm not even sure, like, they don't have any events to take virtually, but I was like, I think they'll enjoy seeing Juanita's face and Christina's face. So,
some of them are watching us right now.
Yeah. If you're there, if you're watching, say hello, say hi. We're excited to have you here on this Tuesday morning. Y'all, 2020. I had a friend recently share the very kind of cliche lemons thing. Like 2020 has definitely been a year of lemons and some really, like, not to take away from the bitterness of a lemon, right? But it's also had some bright spots, some interesting things, some opportunities have come out of it or things like that. And so at Letterpress, we've been thinking about what are some cool things that actually happened this year. And so that's one reason we wanted to do this talk. I would say partnering with Virginia Children's Book Festival is probably one of the coolest things that happened for us in 2020. So much fun. And so I'm very thankful for Juanita being willing to be here and talk with us. And then if you haven't met Christina, say hi.
Hi.
Christina is our account executive based in our Stanton office. We haven't made a public announcement about this yet, but we do in fact have an office in Stanton, Virginia now. That also happened in 2020. And Christina is the head of that. She's been with Letterpress for 2 years now, comes with a really strong PR background, and she learned a whole lot about digital in 2020. So Juanita reached out to me, and we'll talk about Virginia Children's Book Festival in a second. She reached out to me, and then I promptly said, okay, we're ready to go. We want to be live in like 5 weeks or 6 weeks. I forget. I think it was 6 weeks at that point. I connected her with Christina and said, y'all are going to work together on this. And then I promptly went on vacation for a week. So what I want y'all to hear is that this is very much the hard work of Christina and the Letterpress team and Juanita and her team. And I'm just here as Letterpress founder / moderator of the conversation, but all the magic happened because of these two ladies. So anyway, Juanita, tell us a little bit about the Virginia Children's Book Festival and why it started, what y'all's vision was, and what it looked like before 2020.
Right. Well, so this was our 7th year, actually. So that's, wow. I can't even believe that. It seems like it just started. But really, I thought of the Virginia Children's Book Festival because I'd been volunteering at a children's library when I moved back here from Savannah. And hardly any kids ever came in, and I couldn't understand why that was. And I started to do some research and found out that 1 in 5 adults in Southside is functionally illiterate. And that, you know, it's really, if you don't come from a reading home, becoming a reader yourself is very difficult. You know, teachers, they do their very best, but they teach the mechanics of reading. And I really believe in reading for pleasure. And if you become a reader, your chances of success in life are so much higher, even than, no matter what your financial background, your educational background, reading is just incredibly important. So I thought, I want to make the greatest field trip. It's really my dream field trip, essentially, is what it is. It's a very, I guess you could say it's a very selfish endeavor, because I thought, what would be the greatest field trip I would ever go on? And so that is what I really tried to create. And so in the first year that we had it at Longwood, I have to say, Susie Palmer, who was the dean of the library at the time, was the one who gave us the green light at Longwood Library when I moved back here. Oh, no, I'm hearing a repeat on myself.
Sorry, it's my fault. I'm over here. I didn't look like we were live, so I was over here double checking to make sure we were live. It's my fault.
Okay, well, at least it's not my computer. I have to keep it very simple, which is where we all come in when I moved. But sure. The first year we had about 700 kids come. And then in 2019 on Longwood's campus, we had about 16,000 kids come over the course of 3 days.
Wow.
So it's grown a lot, and we provide it all free to all the kids and everybody who comes. It's not free to us. It's free to them. And it's just exploded. I have to say, every year I'm surprised, and we have waiting lists and all that. And so you talked about opportunity. Of course, going virtually is extraordinarily different because one of the things we do at the book festival is it's not just authors giving readings. We try to do really interactive programs. A couple years ago, we had Derek Barnes and Gordon C. James come, and their book, Crown Ode to a Fresh Cut, was about a little African-American boy who goes for his first trip to the barber and how important that is. Mm-hmm. So we actually brought in a barber and a barber's chair, and people got their hair cut during the presentation, even kids. So we try to do things like that. So it was a little different this year, but the opportunity to reach kids who've always wanted to come and not been able to was extraordinary.
Yeah, and I want that. The challenge of that interactive experience, trying to show the joy of learning, all of that. So last year, how many people did you have attend? I think you already said that.
Yeah, about 16,000. And so I probably shouldn't say that because they were staggered, of course. They were not all there at one time. Longwood campus can only accommodate so many kids, but they allow us to fill it as much as we can. But even with that, we had quite a waiting list, and people do tend to come now from far away. We had kids from as far away as Utah and Florida last year come.
Wow.
But this year, this was our first, I don't want to say our first international year because we did have one child from England last year, but this year it blew. I couldn't even believe it when those international numbers started coming in. It was crazy.
Yeah, so let's talk. I know part of the goal for y'all going live was keeping some of that interactive component, right? So it's not just another webinar. So many students are already doing Zoom for school, but keeping that interactive piece, but then also increasing your reach. You're making sure you're reaching students and the opportunity to reach more students because you're not grounded in one physical location.
Right.
So how did that go this year for you guys? Let's talk about kind of that overall impact and reach and even the interactive piece.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, and Christina can probably speak to this a little bit, but one of our real concerns was the safety of the children that were going to be involved and be watching. Because y'all know this from working, virtually all the time, but there's so much that can go wrong, Zoom bombs or whatever they are. And so we had discussed that quite a bit. And working with Christina, she came up with some really great solutions to make it as safe an environment as possible while still having kids interact. And so basically on my end, what I did was sort of put the word out to the community that we were reaching and asked if any kids were interested in participating. And we'd have maybe 2 or 3 or 4 kids who would participate with the author. And then so I vetted them and assigned them and all that. And then Christina, I'm going to let you talk a bit about that safety issue because that was really at the forefront of what we were thinking.
Yeah, and I think that's just an important consideration, especially when, and now talking to everyone who's watching and interested in taking an event live, is to really think about that interactive feature and what you want to do and what you don't want to do. And it definitely means losing some of the control. And I think that's one of the reasons why we opted to not have a live interactive feature. And so just a way to kind of work around that and make sure people are still involved. We had a submission form on the website where people could share any questions they had or for particular authors. And then we made sure we addressed those questions. And the other big interactive piece that we had was bringing in the kids. And I think that was Juanita's idea, and she had already started that earlier in the summer, was a contest to bring in kids live and be able to interact with the authors and ask questions. And I think that was a good way to kind of control that interaction and really, but still have an interactive element. And I think it worked out beautifully. And I absolutely loved seeing the kids coming into the live stream and asking questions and interacting with the authors. It was so much fun. And I think everyone had a blast. And like Juanita mentioned before regarding the reach, I think we had kids from all over the US that participated in that contest and were able to interact with the authors in the live streams. And that's something we probably couldn't have offered to them if it had been in person.
Well, and then talking about the overall reach, how many registrants did we have ultimately this year?
Take a quick look. I've got it here. It looks like, oh goodness, I'm trying to figure this out. I know it was almost 30,000. So I would have to add, which is, I always say there's a reason I run a book festival and not a math festival. So I'm looking at it, but No, there were just there. So it was, you broke it down. So one thing that was great about the registration, the way you did it was you broke it down into whether it were students, teachers, just children on their own, or families and individuals. So we have all of those numbers, but just students themselves were 26,646. And
Wow.
then it looks like at least a couple thousand more families and teachers and things like that. So it was a lot.
Yeah, and then we got like a big contingent from Canada, right? Like there's a surprise. We'll talk about promotion in a minute, like and things we did like that. Our goal is to keep this to about 30 minutes. But also to those who are watching, I see Cam's watching and Joni's watching and Lindsay. Hey guys, Hope is watching from South Boston. It's great to see you guys. If you have questions, feel free to drop it in the chat. I'm trying to pay attention, and we're happy to answer, if we can, questions you have while we're going through. But the other thing I want to bring up, I'm going off script here. We have a little bit of a script. I'm going off script. We talked about that, the goal for being experiential and how we worked on achieving that. We talked about the reach numbers and the registration process. And I want to point out the opportunity with virtual really is to get a lot of data, right? There's this opportunity to, just like Juanita pointed out, you can figure out how many students, how many teachers, those types of things. And then also we have email addresses for the adults who attended, right? Not necessarily all the kids, but for the adults, a list, which is great for this year, 2021, because I'm already in 2021. It's great for this year already as an opportunity of something to harness, so that those possibilities are amazing. But there was another kind of challenge we had, if I remember, that we had right out the gate is the Children's Book Festival is no small thing. If you haven't seen it, the authors they get, like y'all have a hit, like a record of the number of authors that end up getting announced for like Newbery Medal, right? Like the caliber of authors are phenomenal. I'll let Juanita talk that, but there was a challenge around that too, as far as we wanted to stream, we wanted to give people access, but then we had to also follow certain guidelines as far as how much access they could have and for how long to meet the requirements of the author or the publisher. But so We're not just talking about self-publishers here. We're talking about Jeff Kennedy or like big names. So Juanita, do you want to talk a little bit about that challenge too that we had to address?
Right. So it's very specific, I guess, with authors. Well, let's put it this way. So this year, I think for really any guest you're going to bring in on a virtual event, they've been switching to doing a lot of these. And so their time is very valuable. So they do charge money for it. But also, having done a virtual event, what we did was we worked it out so the sessions would only be archived for about 2 weeks after the festival ended, because why would they? This is their bread and butter, and everybody thinks authors are rich, and some are. The majority are not. And so I always say, think about being paid twice a year, and you never know how much you're going to get paid. So author visits and things really are key to, just making it through your everyday life as an author. And so I really try to respect an author's time and pay them as much as I can, because they do such wonderful things for us. But, if we had kept their sessions up in perpetuity, a lot of people wouldn't go to their new virtual events. They wouldn't be able to make any money. So, we worked, and, certainly some publishers, we had a couple of authors when we were doing their sessions that were like, you have 1 hour only with this author, because they are. And I will say, as far as Jeff Kinney goes, who is the author of the Diary of a Wimpy Kid series, he's so generous. But he also, some of these big authors, they have to do with their agents and whatnot. They just say, okay, I'll be there. I want to do it. Just tell me when. And so he extraordinarily generous, but we knew we had to work within a particular time limit to get everything done. And we only get one shot at it too. If it goes wrong, then, and that's, I've got to tell you that it didn't, I was so worried that something would happen and something would go wrong and it would be just, ugh, but y'all were amazing. We didn't have any trouble at all.
Oh, well, and it took a process, and some of these considerations took real thought, real planning. There was a whole process and system we had set up. So just for those who aren't familiar, the setup of this particular event, what used to be a 3-day in-person event, or is it 4-day in-person event? 3-day, became a month, and we had a week of a theme, right? And every day was a different speaker or author along that theme. And so we had a whole system set up as far as encouraging people to watch the archive videos, but then we would have to go back in and take them down. And we kind of created some systems and some strategies to make sure we were meeting those guidelines, but also getting as much as we could out of it. So there's a lot of front end planning, and then a lot of back end kind of planning in the back end too, that we had to really think about when doing it. So real quick, before Christina's gonna talk about some of the more technical things, but Juanita, one last question for you is, before we kind of shift over to technical stuff, like what kind of feedback did you get from this year? What kind of feedback or response have y'all gotten?
Well, the scary feedback is that people want this every year now. They want this to be part of the book festival itself. So that this was a major operation, and the thought of doing it again on top of the regular festival, it makes my eyes water a little bit.
Oh, we got it.
But
churches can do it. If churches can do in person and streaming,
right.
We can do it.
Yeah. So, but it's been really tremendous feedback. I was surprised by the number of people that reached out to me personally to thank the book festival for doing this. There are teachers. I remember one in particular, actually from Campbell County, who's a reading specialist. And her school never allows them to come. And she actually called me, and she cried a little bit. She was so grateful because she's always wanted to bring her students. And so that was really, what's so funny, and I know we're going to switch to the technical part of it, but this is going to sound like an ad, and why not? But there's so many different platforms you could use, so many do-it-yourself platforms now for a virtual event. And I have to say that, it's not like I didn't look at those. I really, really did. But the price for those was the same as paying y'all. And I had every one of y'all behind the whole thing, doing all of the detail work, catering it to what we needed. I would really say that we're so lucky to have y'all here and available to have made this happen, because it would have been a very different experience. And the funny thing, and I'll turn it over to Christina after this, but I remember talking to her during the month, and she'd say, well, how's it going? I'd say, it's really boring, actually, because y'all had done so much work ahead of time. All the prep work was done. So I just had to show up and moderate and do that. And then I would just be like, well, that was easy.
Well, it was a joy, and it was exciting. We have clients outside of Farmville now too, but it's just, it just feels so good to help work with a local organization we know and we care about. And like that has all the warm fuzzies, right? Like, yeah, it's a lot of fun. I think Christina, for Christina, it was also like, Christina could talk about, but having an all-consuming project also was an experience in and of itself, right? Like that was her base. She lived, breathed, and slept VCBF for all of September, I think, right, Christina?
Yeah, it was definitely a great learning experience, I think, just because we hadn't taken on a project like this before, mainly because there was no need, I think. And going through that from the beginning to the end with the whole planning, the maintenance, the tech implications, I think we took away so much, and now we feel very confident saying this is a service we can offer and we're good at it. And I couldn't have done it without Juanita's help, and she did a lot of the planning, and we were both, I think we had to be very flexible in this process, and I think that's what everyone needs to a certain degree if they want to take an event virtual. And but yeah, I think we did a good job together.
So Christina, if there's an organization watching, I know we're actually working with, I don't think it's a spoiler alert, Moton Museum on a big event that's coming. Stay tuned, guys. Something big's coming in 2021. Something exciting with that. But any other organizations that are thinking about taking an event virtual, I know you had some things to consider or questions to ask yourself that people might not be considering. I think we already hit some things, especially around registration and tracking data and details, and then also about what happens after the event with the material and some ways to think about that. But you have some really specific kind of technical questions to consider too along those lines you wanted to share.
Yeah, I think the first question, and that was what we were talking about with Juanita in our first meeting, is where do you want to stream to? Do you want this live stream to live on your website? And you could obviously make it easy and just stream to Facebook. But Juanita, maybe you want to answer that question real quick on why that is actually pretty important that you stream to I would call it a neutral platform.
Well, a lot of it, again, has to do with safety issues and privacy issues for children. I try to be very aware of that. And so social media platforms, you just never know who can do what with it, and I realize that in a digital world, you can't be 100% protected ever. But, it also, having it streamed to our website, and we had it behind a wall, and you had to have a registration code and everything get in there. It did add levels of security for the children and families that were there. But additionally, it drives people to your website, to your branded area where you can have, once you have them there at your website, there are all sorts of other things they can look at, and of course, one of the things that we worked with y'all on was to get those supplementary materials and everything on the website for teachers and parents, activities and everything like that to go along with it. Whereas if it were just on YouTube or Facebook or something like that, we wouldn't have been able to have such a treasure trove and that enabled us to partner further with the LCVA or with the MOTN, our normal partners, where we can send people to their website, and things like that, or they can give us materials to include. So I thought that was really important.
Absolutely set up stores just around the week topic. So
yes,
you went to this landing page, you went to individual sessions, you actually saw the related materials, the related books, things like that. And it goes to sponsorship too. It's really important from a sponsorship level for VCBF to be able to track its registrants. So there was a real conversation at the beginning about whether or not we actually stream just openly, right? Like just have it stream live on YouTube. Facebook was also issued because a lot of schools don't allow YouTube to be streamed. So if students were watching it, we had students watching from home, and we had students watching in classroom settings, I believe, right, from a large screen in a classroom. So that was the reason Facebook wouldn't necessarily work. But allowing it to be free, but requiring registration was our way of also tracking numbers for sponsorship as well. So that was another kind of consideration.
Just going back to the tech piece of it, I think the first thing you really need to look into if you are planning on streaming to your website is whether your current hosting plan that you have allows a certain amount of, or potentially high traffic. So what we did, we actually moved the entire website over to a new host for a lot of reasons. We have great partners at Letterpress who helped us with that. But if that's, if you don't want to do that, you can at least upgrade your plan with your current host. And usually they allow you to do that for only 1 month. So it doesn't entail a lot of additional cost. It's just upgrading that plan for the month of the event and making sure that if you do get those 30,000 people watching, you want to make sure that the website doesn't crash.
Yeah.
So I think that was a big piece. And for us, also knowing that we have that support team in the background with our partners was very helpful too, just in case something would go wrong or we needed any development help. Because then also, once you take it to the website, there is a lot more development work that needs to go into it, since you need to integrate technology and all that. But that's a part that I think we have experts on the team that can manage that.
And talking through that.
I just want to say those are things that it never would have occurred to me. And that's where, y'all's expertise, it's not as simple as just streaming, plopping in, if you make your own website on WordPress or something and dropping in, a video block or something. It's not nearly that simple. I mean, it's really, really complicated. And Christina would email me and call me and be like, well, we need to blah, blah, blah. I'm like, whatever. Like, sure. Like, you got this. So it's, again, like and if I had a problem, I mean, I could just pick up the phone and call y'all and you were there and fixed it. So it's just, again, I know it just sounds like an ad, but the slick, shiny emails you get from Attendify or something like that sound really good, but it's just, I can't imagine that we would have succeeded this way without, your whole team there.
Well, I think it comes down to questions of there are box systems that work well, but you need a lot of time and energy. It depends on how much time and energy and staff support you have to figure out, if you're an executive director watching this and you think, oh, my communications person whose plate is already full can add another 5 hours a week to work on this. No, this is 20 or 30 hours a week prepping for this event up to now. We spread out the time a little bit more, but it took a lot of time and energy to find those solutions. And I think, Juanita, you pointed out something that I wanted to clarify, and actually Christina's going to talk about is that the technology can be confusing, but if you're thinking about doing this yourself on your website, one of the easiest solutions is to stream live using a tool like we're using right now, which is StreamYard. You can also use BeLive or something like that. Christina is going to talk more about that. It's going to give you tools like we're doing right now with Facebook Live, and that you can have multiple people, you can share your screen, things like that you normally couldn't do with a live, just a single camera. But what's going to happen is it's going to stream it out, usually through Facebook or YouTube, and then that YouTube feed is what's actually embedded on your site, for example. So for Virginia Children's Book Festival, we had a wall up where you need to register and then have a password. The password was very simple, but we didn't care too much. It wasn't like, we didn't want to go through the time and energy to have each individual user have an individual password, because it wasn't like people were paying and we had to secure it too much. But we definitely had that password, and then you could go to the page that had the streaming side. I think we called it live. What did we call it? The studio, not the studio.
The theater. Was it the streaming theater? Yes.
Yeah, we had the theater that you could see. That would be actually what it was streaming in was a YouTube live stream. But that YouTube live wasn't live on YouTube necessarily, right, Christina? So it's like so Christina has some pointers along those too when you're thinking about those sorts of things when you have to stream through a tool like that. And just as a side note, you're going to want to use a tool like that because you can't, it's just like with videos. Your website cannot hold a full video on it and run smoothly and load quickly. So most times when you're seeing videos on websites, either they're really small and short and condensed, or they're actually embedded videos from YouTube or somewhere else, and they're holding the weight of that video, right? And holding that energy so your website doesn't have to support all of it. So Christina, I think you had some pointers around that, right?
Yeah, I think just when you Google tools to use for live streaming, you're going to get a lot of options. And so I just wanted to quickly address the two options that we really like and the type of questions you have to ask in order to identify the right tool for your organization or your event. And that's, so we've worked with StreamYard and Zoom. We've had great experience with both of them. And so a few questions to consider are, do you need live captions? Because that's something that not every tool offers. Another question to ask is how much creativity do you want within your broadcast studio? StreamYard, for example, is really great for that. It offers a lot of different little features that you can pull in banners and logos, and the way you can kind of creatively lay out the whole live stream and the video. So you have a lot of options there. From my understanding, Zoom is a little bit cleaner in that regard. So it's used more for something like a live webinar, for example. But since the Children's Book Festival, it's a fun and entertaining event, we kind of wanted to have those fun features as well. And I apologize, my light keeps changing here. The sun is coming through the window, and I'm trying to figure out how to set up my computer better. Here we go. So those are definitely questions to ask. Another thing is that interactive feature. If you want people to actually go in and you want everyone to be able to read comments, that's something you want to ensure that the tool you choose offers. And I think
we chose not to do that. We chose not to do that. That's something else you had talked earlier, Ilse, about special considerations with authors and things like that. And especially since we do a pretty intense young adult program, those are often mature topics, and that's another thing that we did. We made sure to have announcements, if it were going to be a mature theme, we would have the recommended age, and we, had the warning at the beginning, but we did not want to have open forum for comments on those mature themed programs. Too many horror stories about that. And then Christina, she brought up something wonderful about the captioning with our special needs programming that we do. It was really important that we have closed captioning as an option. And so Christina ensured that our archive sessions were all closed captioned. We couldn't quite figure out how to get them to be closed captioned live, but once they were archived the next morning, then we were able to have the captioning. That was really important, and Christina figured that all out for us.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that just depends on the software that you're going to use. So if you want live captions, I'm pretty sure Zoom offers that. With StreamYard, there are other,
And to jump in, you can do anything you want, pretty much. I would say but also part of it is, and we're working with a nonprofit here. Money, there are live we had some solutions, and we looked at the price tag, and we're like, okay, we can find a hack for this that kind of solves around that, right, in a way that works good enough. Sorry, Christina, go ahead. Options.
No, these are important things, and I think the advice I'd like to give anyone who's planning a live event is to really create a list with all of these features and really identifying what do I need and what does the software need to offer for me to make this happen, and then look into the options and consider what is crucial and where are ways to work around something, like with the live captions, for example, and that can save a lot of money too. I think these are really the main tech questions you need to consider. And then also on a side note too, is when you look into live streaming, make sure that you check your account, especially YouTube, and make sure it's actually qualified for live streaming, because there are certain criteria that need to be met in order to qualify. And that's something we ran into with a VCBF, that we actually didn't meet those. And again, there are ways around, but this all needs to go into the planning and really needs to be thought through, and research needs to be done in order to guarantee that it runs smoothly.
Yeah, and it can be helpful to talk to someone who's done it before, so they can ask the questions. Once again, some of these that you might not even already know to ask or consider. So yeah, no, thank you guys. We have about 5 minutes left. We're going to hopefully sign off around 10:35, 10:37. So if y'all have any questions in the chat, feel free to drop them in, ask us. I know, Juanita, we just wanted to ask you generally, as we've talked through this technical stuff, what are the tips you have as far as preparing to help it run smoothly, like you would have for planners or people working on their own live event?
Well, the first thing I would say, and I don't know, this year I guess was a little different because nobody knew what the fall was going to look like. And I decided pretty early on that we would have to pull the plug on the live festival. And then all the virtual aspect of it, the majority of book festivals and things like that just canceled, and they didn't do a virtual event. A couple of them did, usually ones with a much higher budget than we have. But, so I explored trying to do it myself and things like that, and I just was never comfortable with it. But what I would say is give yourself plenty of time, because I will say I put Ilsa and Christina and everybody there under the gun like nobody's business. I mean, what you think is enough time is not enough time. I mean, 6 weeks sounds like a long time, but it's really not. And at the same time that y'all were planning, I remember one thing that we were really stuck on was the lineup itself, because all the authors with whom I'd signed contracts in January, had to be revisited. And some of them were not comfortable doing a virtual event. And so my lineup changed so much. And Christina's like, what is it? I'm like, I'm still, trying to nail down, the last person for Hip Hop Week and, this sort of thing. So, but it's time, really I'd say give yourself an awful lot of time. And like you said, Ilsa, you have to really be prudent with your choices, because every little bell and whistle is going to add to your budget, whether it's work hours, whether it's a fee for technology. You have to streamline it as much as possible, I feel, because otherwise good night, nurse. I mean, you'll even have to tell me how many total hours y'all spent, but I could have, if we'd had the time and money, goodness knows, what more we could have done.
It was a full-time job for someone for a month.
Yeah.
Yeah. to do that, I would say at least, yeah.
And just to add to that preparation piece and planning, I think one of the reasons why we ended up not having any tech issues during the event and not really having any issues during the stream was that Juanita did a ton of dry runs with all of the authors. So I will say test. That's super crucial. Also test the technology, and not the day off and not the day before, not the week, like the month before. Ideally, you really, it also just takes a lot of stress out of your lives if you know you're set and you know how the technology runs. So making sure that everyone who's going to be on that event and is going to play a role within that hosting and participating, you really want to make sure that you've tested all the software options and pieces, and also have a backup if someone gets sick and then no one knows how to embed a link or update certain features. That's something you want to ensure you always have a few people on the team who are trained on all of the tasks that need to happen. And so we're thinking this event maintenance through what needs to happen before, what in terms of like tech and maintenance, and happen during the event and happen after the event, and making sure you have those tasks. You can build like a nice little spreadsheet or whatever you want. But I think that's just really important, thinking that through and making sure you have the team support to handle all that. I would say that was one of my main takeaways from this project.
Yeah, redundancy, like at flying an airplane, is really key and really helpful, and transparency. That's the other reason you test. You realize, oh, someone else needs access or needs to be an admin, or someone else needs to, you find the things you don't know. I think we've done so many live events, and we know all the things after doing them 5 or 6 or 7 times, and just kind of relearning that process digitally that takes. So last thing, we have just like a minute left. Promotion, really quick. I know we did like a quick and dirty promo plan, wasn't super fancy, but one of the things we did was ID all the people that were already invested or interested or connected with the festival. If you have minimum budget, really focus on the people that you already know, that you're already connected with, making sure you have their emails, reporters or authors or influencers that have written about you in the past. I think, Christina, we also did a little bit of research on potential influencers or people that could, and we made a really simple kind of pitch sheet. Am I using the right word for that, Christina? And actually divvied it up with volunteers and had volunteers help reach out and contact different people and organizations. So that was like a really quick and dirty way that we did promotion kind of at the last hour, right? Was taking our list of existing contacts, finding ones or people that were similar or interesting in that way, and then creating a really simple pitch and helping or accessing volunteers to help get the word out that way. I think that was fairly successful. Do you have anything else around promotion you wanted to add, Christina or Juanita?
Yeah, I would say just thinking about big organizations that are very specifically targeting your audience, and they are willing to share your news without getting much out of that, just because they think, yes, this content is relevant to my audience. So what we did, we shared, it was just the press release we had anyways, and a few sample social media posts with a visual, and we sent that to the Virginia Public Library Association, and they shared that via their email server. So that was very minimal effort on our end, but it really led to this snowball effect of them sharing it with all these smaller libraries across Virginia, and that just increased our reach tremendously. I think thinking who can be that person or that email list on top of the whole mountain or whatever that gets the snowball rolling, I think that's really helpful.
Yeah.
I would say one other thing real quick is that we sort of brushed past this a little bit, but normally the book festival is 3 days and it's a field trip. And so when kids come, they come for the whole day and they go back to school. And so before we ever got started, I had sent out a survey to our teachers and everybody in our database and asked them how they would want the festival to work. Because, now we're dealing with teachers and parents whose days are full of virtual events. And it became clear very quickly that, sitting in front of a computer for a full day of programming would not work. Sorry, big truck. So instead, we decided to do it for the month. And I do think that as far as promotion goes, having themes really helped as far as promotion, rather, because we were able to promote not just the entire event itself, but the themed weeks. And I think that really, breaking it down into those parts that are attractive to people was really, I think that helped us out a lot as well.
I think that's a good point. And there was a real strategic decision that was made around not trying to do a day of sessions, right? Like breaking it down. Like you're virtual, so trying to free your mind a little bit in terms of people aren't having to make the drive. How can you make this more accessible to folks or things like that? So many tips, so many things. Juanita, thank you so much for your time. It's been invaluable. Christina is now our live event guru. And then if anyone's watching and would love to just spend a little bit of time chatting with Letterpress about questions or thoughts they have, or we can just help with a little mini plan or some implementation or something, we're happy to help with any which way. We hope this has been helpful. And then Virginia Children's Book Festival is a nonprofit, so I'm putting their donate link here in the comments. If you want to support that mission, you can do that, especially as they think about what lies ahead for 2021.
We are trying to work with Letterpress here on having live events every month. So any bit of help would be awesome.
Yeah, we could actually use y'all's help. We're trying to think of a sponsor, a larger sponsor. We're thinking like a $10,000 sponsor that could help fund the VCBF being virtual regularly. I feel like going live would work really well for Dominion, right? Or maybe a bank, I don't know. So if y'all have any ideas of organizations that you feel like the work of VCBF and the reach that they're getting and the name recognition, the authors they're working for fits with an organization that's looking for something to sponsor, do let us know. We'd be happy to talk to them. But yeah, guys, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And if anyone has questions, you can still put it in the chat and we'll work on answering them. And yeah, I think we're good.
All right.
Thank you. It was fun being here. I hope people took something away and feel a little bit more prepared for taking their event virtual.
If I can do it, anybody can do it. I mean, truly, that's the truth.